The scent of simmering broth and aged spices was the lifeblood of the hearthside diner, a comforting aroma that clung to the faded wallpaper and seeped into Evie Hayes's very bones. At just over 60, her hands, calloused from decades of kneading dough and stirring pots, moved with unpracticed ease as she wiped down the worn countertop, a faint hum escaping her lips. The diner, tucked away in a quiet, unassuming corner of Westwick, was more than just a place of business. It was a living monument to her family's legacy, a quaint anachronism in a city increasingly obsessed with sleek modernity and fleeting trends. Its vintage sign, a little chipped and faded, still proudly proclaimed its name, though fewer eyes seem to notice it these days. The red vinyl booths, once bustling with families and chatter, often sat empty, reflecting the quiet struggle that gnawed at Evie's heart. She had inherited the hearthside from her parents, who had inherited it from theirs. A long line of honest, hard-working people who believed that good food, simply prepared with love, could nourish not just the body, but the soul. Evie herself was a testament to this philosophy. Her silver hair, habitually pulled back in a neat bun, framed a face etched with the gentle lines of a life lived with purpose and quiet dignity. She wore no makeup, no fancy clothes, just a simple apron over her practical attire. Her beauty lay in her genuine warmth, her unwavering dedication to her craft, and the profound love she poured into every dish that left her kitchen. But the city around the hearthside was changing, evolving at a relentless, unforgiving pace that Evie found increasingly difficult to keep up with. Trendy new cafes with minimalist aesthetics and overpriced lattes sprouted up like mushrooms, luring away her dwindling clientele. Rent was climbing, ingredient costs were rising, and the once familiar clatter of plates and cheerful banter had been replaced by an unsettling quiet, punctuated only by the distant hum of city traffic. Evie, with her steadfast loyalty to tradition, found herself caught in a relentless tug-of-war. Her heart yearned to preserve the legacy of her family, to continue serving the comforting, time-honored dishes that held so many memories for her loyal, albeit shrinking, customer base. Yet, the gnawing anxiety of financial instability, the fear of not being able to make ends meet, pressed down on her, a heavy, suffocating weight. She would spend sleepless nights poring over ledgers, her brow furrowed, her eyes scanning columns of numbers that seemed to shrink rather than grow. Should she modernize? Should she introduce new dishes? Flashier presentations? The thought felt like a betrayal to the spirit of the hearthside, to the very essence of what her family had built. She craved the recognition that her food, her true food, deserved, not for fame or fortune, but for the validation of her life's work, for the quiet reassurance that her efforts were not in vain. Yet, she was too humble, too rooted in her traditions, to seek it out aggressively. This internal conflict, the quiet battle between tradition and survival, between passion and practicality, was the silent storm brewing beneath the outwardly calm surface of her life. She was a master of her craft, her culinary skills honed over decades, but in a world that valued hype over heart, her quiet genius was slowly, painfully, fading into obscurity. She had always believed that good food spoke for itself, but now, it seemed, the world had stopped listening. One particularly bitter winter evening, the biting wind rattling the windows of the diner, Evie was preparing to close up. The day had been slow, another disheartening tally of meager sales. She was methodically wiping down the last table, her movements heavy with fatigue, when the bell above the door jingled softly. A man, huddled deep in a threadbare, oversized coat, his shoulders hunched against the cold, shuffled inside. He was clearly homeless, his face etched with the ravages of exposure and hunger, his eyes darting nervously around the empty diner. Evie's heart, though weary, immediately softened. She saw not a burden, but a human being in need. Without a word, she gestured to a booth by the window, her expression gentle and inviting. The man hesitated, then slowly shuffled over, settling into the warm vinyl with a sigh of obvious relief. He looked up at her, his eyes clouded with a mixture of hope and resignation. I don't have any money, ma'am, he mumbled, his voice raspy, barely a whisper. Evie simply smiled, a soft, compassionate curve of her lips. She walked into the kitchen, her movements purposeful, instead of offering him leftovers or a quick, impersonal handout. She returned moments later with a steaming bowl of her signature beef stew, rich with tender meat and hearty vegetables, its aroma filling the small diner with a comforting warmth. Beside it, she placed a thick slice of her homemade sourdough bread, still warm from the oven. "Eat," she said, her voice soft but firm, a quiet command laced with profound kindness. She didn't ask questions, didn't demand payment, didn't make him feel like a charity case. She simply watched as he devoured the meal, the hunger in his eyes slowly replaced by a look of profound gratitude, a silent acknowledgement of her genuine human connection. This small, unheralded act of generosity, performed without an audience, was Evie's silent testament to her unwavering human dignity, her intrinsic goodness that transcended her own financial struggles. It was her save the cat moment, a quiet reaffirmation of the compassionate soul that lay beneath her weathered exterior. The man finished his meal, tears silently tracing paths through the grime on his cheeks, and simply nodded, a heartfelt gesture that spoke volumes, before quietly slipping back out into the cold, leaving behind a subtle warmth in the quiet diner. When the diner was finally empty, the city lights beginning to twinkle outside, Evie would often sit at her small, cluttered office desk in the back, away from the kitchen. She'd retrieve a worn, leather-bound journal from a locked drawer, its cover soft with age, its pages brittle and yellowed. This wasn't a ledger or a recipe book for the daily specials. This was her secret, her most prized possession. With a delicate touch, she would turn the pages, each one filled with meticulous, elegant script, not just recipes, but philosophical musings on the art of cooking, intricate diagrams of flavor profiles, and detailed observations on the science of texture and aroma. Interspersed throughout were faded photographs of bustling kitchens, of vibrant European markets, of young, eager faces, including her own, beaming with a youthful idealism. And occasionally, almost hidden in the margins, were subtle hints of a past that few knew about: a faded stamp from Le Cordon Bleu Paris, a mention of Chef Dubois' exacting standards, or a scribbled note about a gold medal at the International Culinary Exhibition, 1980. This journal was her silent confidant, a testament to a brilliance that had once shone brightly on a global stage, a past where her culinary artistry was lauded and respected by the highest echelons of the gastronomic world. She had, in her youth, been a prodigy, a rising star, but she had chosen to return home, to her family's diner, valuing the quiet comfort of tradition over the glittering allure of fame. It was a choice she had never regretted, but one that few in Westwick, save for a select, often dismissive few, ever truly understood. This quiet secret, nestled within the pages of her journal, was the subtle seed of the legend she truly was, patiently waiting for the right moment to bloom. In stark contrast to Evie's quiet humility, Julian Thorne moved through the city's culinary scene like a preening peacock, his every step calculated for maximum effect, a rising food critic for Gourmet and Glimmer, Westwick's premier luxury lifestyle magazine. Julian was a master of self-promotion, a connoisseur of superficiality. He was young, impeccably dressed, with a perfectly coiffed haircut and a sneering condescension that he mistook for intellectual superiority. His reviews were known for their biting wit, their cruel precision, and their unwavering focus on the cutting edge of fine dining. He reviewed not for the love of food, but for the adoration of his own cleverness, for the thrill of wielding his pen as a weapon, capable of making or breaking reputations with a single, devastating phrase. He reveled in controversy, believing that a scathing review garnered more attention than a glowing one. He despised anything he perceived as old-fashioned or unrefined, particularly small, family-run establishments like the Hearthside Diner. To him, they were relics, dusty remnants of a bygone era, undeserving of his discerning palate or his valuable column inches. He saw himself as a tastemaker, a gatekeeper, dictating what was worthy of culinary attention in Westwick. And he had no patience for anything that didn't fit his narrow, self-serving definition of excellence. His ambition was boundless, fueled by an insatiable hunger for fame and influence, and he was utterly ruthless in his pursuit of it. He thrived on the applause of the elite, the validation of his powerful words, and the silent fear he instilled in the hearts of chefs across the city. His primary goal was to solidify his reputation as Westwick's most influential and feared food critic, and he would trampling over anyone, or any establishment, that stood in his way. Completely unbeknownst to Julian Thorne, or indeed, to most of Westwick, there was another, far more powerful force at play in the culinary world. A quiet guardian of gastronomic integrity, Chef Antoine Dubois, a world-renowned French chef. Antoine commanded a global empire of Michelin-starred restaurants, each one a temple to culinary perfection. He was a man of quiet gravitas, his movements deliberate, his eyes keen with an intelligence that went far beyond mere technical skill. He valued tradition, authenticity, and the profound emotional connection that food could forge, qualities often overlooked in the glittering, competitive world of fine dining. But beyond his public persona, Antoine harbored a profound, deeply personal secret. Evie Hayes was his mentor, his mère cuisinière, mother cook, the woman who had truly taught him the soul of cooking. Decades ago, as a struggling, technically brilliant but emotionally detached young chef, he had been sent by his own rigid culinary masters to a humble little diner on the outskirts of Paris, run by a prodigious young American chef named Evelyn Hayes. There, she had not just taught him recipes, she had taught him how to infuse food with love, how to understand the unspoken language of ingredients, and how to create dishes that resonated with the heart. She had opened his eyes to a dimension of cooking that went far beyond technique, transforming him from a skilled technician into a true artist. He owed her everything. Antoine, despite his global fame, would often make secret, unannounced pilgrimages to Westwick, slipping into the Hearthside Diner like a phantom, unnoticed by the few patrons who might be there. He would sit in a secluded booth in the back, often wearing a simple hat pulled low, and quietly order Evie's daily special, or a piece of her legendary apple pie. He would savor each bite, his eyes closing in silent appreciation, memories of his formative years flooding his mind. He never spoke to Evie about his true identity, never revealed his Michelin stars. He simply came. He ate. And then, before leaving, he would discreetly slip a large, often exorbitant, sum of money under his plate, far more than the bill. A silent tribute to the woman who had given him the greatest gift of his culinary life. Evie, ever pragmatic, would simply assume it was a generous patron, a quiet blessing from the universe. Antoine's visits were a testament to his deep loyalty, his profound respect, and the quiet, unwavering bond he felt with the woman who had shaped his destiny. He was her unseen guardian, her secret champion, waiting for the opportune moment when his quiet presence could finally illuminate her true, undeniable brilliance to a world that had, for too long, remained blind. He carried the weight of her forgotten legacy, a silent vow to ensure her true genius would one day be recognized, a conviction that stemmed not from obligation, but from a profound love and gratitude for the woman who taught him to truly taste life. The crisp Westwick morning, usually a source of quiet comfort for Evie Hayes, now felt brittle and sharp, each ray of sunlight piercing through the diner's dusty windows, a stark reminder of the escalating anxieties that gnawed at her. The familiar scent of brewing coffee, once an aromatic invitation to a peaceful day, now carried a faint, unsettling undertone of desperation. She had just opened a letter, its official seal cold and unforgiving against her calloused fingers. It was from Mr. Henderson, the notoriously unyielding landlord of the diner's building. The words blurred before her eyes, but the message was chillingly clear: a drastic increase in monthly rent, effective immediately, compounded by a stern demand for overdue payments that had accumulated over the leaner winter months. The financial tightrope Evie had been precariously balancing on for years had suddenly snapped. The Hearthside Diner, her family's legacy, her entire world, was now teetering on the precipice of forced closure. The letter wasn't just a financial threat. It was a direct assault on her very identity, a merciless demand that she either conform to the brutal realities of the modern economy or relinquish the sacred trust of her ancestors. Evie sank onto a worn stool behind the counter, the letter fluttering from her trembling hand onto the cool, worn surface. A wave of profound despair washed over her, chilling her to the bone. Give up. Just give up. Evie. The insidious whisper echoed in her mind. Her shoulders sagged, the years of quiet struggle suddenly pressing down on her with an unbearable weight. She envisioned the empty booths, the silent kitchen, the faded sign of the Hearthside Diner being taken down for good. The thought was a physical ache, a gaping void in her chest. For a fleeting moment, the allure of surrender was overwhelming. Selling the diner, retiring to a quiet, anonymous life, free from the relentless anxieties of debt and declining business. But then, an image flashed in her mind: her grandmother, a stern but loving figure, kneading dough with fierce determination. Her father, his eyes alight with pride as he plated a perfectly cooked meal. The countless smiling faces of her loyal customers. Generations of families who had celebrated birthdays, mourned losses, and found solace within these very walls. The laughter of children, the quiet confessions of lonely souls, the murmured praises for her comforting food. They all resonated within her, a silent chorus of love and loyalty. This wasn't just a business. It was a sanctuary, a home for many, a repository of cherished memories. And it was her legacy, her sacred duty to protect. A flicker of defiance ignited deep within her, a stubborn ember of resolve that refused to be extinguished. She wouldn't abandon them. She wouldn't let the spirit of the Hearthside die. Her hands, though tired, still remembered the dance of cooking. Her heart still beat with the rhythm of flavors. She longed, with a fierce, quiet passion, to continue serving, to continue nourishing, to prove that genuine warmth and authentic taste could still triumph over fleeting trends and cynical judgment. This profound sense of duty to her heritage and her community awakened a dormant instinct within her, a fierce, protective maternal drive that demanded she fight, even when all hope seemed lost. She would not allow her family's enduring legacy to be erased by the cold hand of financial hardship. It was precisely at this desperate juncture that Julian Thorne, in his pristine tailored suit and polished Italian shoes, found himself unexpectedly passing by the Hearthside Diner. He was on his way to review Gastronomy's Edge, a newly opened avant-garde fusion restaurant nearby, a place he was already planning to lavish with praise for its audacious concepts and exorbitant prices. The Hearthside, with its faded sign and unassuming exterior, caught his eye not as a potential culinary delight, but as a quaint, almost comical relic. A sneer of disdain touched his lips. Perfect, he thought. A malicious gleam in his eyes. A little palate cleanser before the main event. And a golden opportunity for a truly scathing review. He envisioned the headlines: Julian Thorne exposes Westwick's culinary dinosaurs, or the Hearthside Diner where flavor goes to die. The thought of tearing down such an unpretentious establishment, of exposing its perceived failings to his sophisticated readership, filled him with a perverse sense of satisfaction. It would solidify his image as a fearless, uncompromising critic, a slayer of outdated culinary traditions. He strode through the worn wooden door, his arrival signaled by a faint, almost mournful chime of the bell above. He looked around with an air of theatrical distaste, his nose subtly wrinkling at the faint scent of honest, home-cooked food. He wasn't there to eat. He was there to dissect, to condemn, to perform a literary vivisection on a dying institution. Julian chose a booth by the window, its red vinyl slightly cracked with age, and surveyed the simple, laminated menu with an exaggerated sigh of boredom. He settled on the signature beef stew, a dish he considered emblematic of the diner's likely mediocrity, plain, unadventurous, utterly lacking in the conceptual audacity he so adored. Evie, weary but still moving with her inherent grace, took his order. She felt a familiar prickle of apprehension at his aloof, almost disdainful demeanor, a stark contrast to her usual clientele. She moved into the kitchen, her hands working on instinct, preparing the stew as she always did: slow-cooked beef, tender vegetables. A rich, aromatic broth simmered for hours, infused with a secret blend of herbs passed down through generations. She poured her heart into it, as she did with every dish, a silent prayer that the food itself would speak to the soul of the eater. But Julian Thorne arrived with a narrative already written in his mind, a judgment already rendered. He tasted the stew, his face a mask of condescending evaluation. He noted the chipped edge of the bowl, the slightly faded pattern on the placemat, the lack of pretentious garnishes. He found the broth under-seasoned, ignoring its subtle, complex layering of flavors. The meat uninspired, overlooking its melt-in-your-mouth tenderness, and the vegetables pedestrian, disregarding their farm-fresh sweetness. He deliberately ignored the warmth that emanated from the dish, the comforting aroma that filled the air, the profound sense of nourishment it offered. He craved spectacle, not sustenance, novelty, not authenticity. He saw only what he wanted to see: a tired, outdated diner, serving bland, uninspired food. The fact that the stew was a masterpiece of slow-cooked comfort, a culinary hug on a plate, was utterly lost on him. He saw no innovation, no art, no disruption in its quiet perfection. He missed the very essence of the hearthside, the profound, unpretentious soul of Evie's cooking. He meticulously scribbled notes in a small, expensive notebook, his pen scratching furiously, each stroke a silent condemnation. He barely touched the bread, deemed it too rustic. He left half the stew, feigning an air of sophisticated distaste. The genuine warmth, the profound love infused in every bite, passed right through him, leaving no trace. He was immune to its magic, blinded by his own towering arrogance and superficiality. The moment Julian Thorne exited the hearthside diner, the bell above the door jingling with a final, almost mocking sound, he pulled out his phone, his fingers already flying across the keyboard. He didn't wait. He didn't reflect. He didn't consider the human impact of his words. He was driven by a single, ruthless ambition to craft the most devastating, attention-grabbing review of a dying establishment he possibly could. His words dripped with a venomous disdain, each phrase a calculated insult. He described the hearthside as a culinary graveyard, a testament to stagnant mediocrity, and a place where flavor committed suicide. He scoffed at its quaint atmosphere, calling it shabby and depressing. He even mocked Evie's genuine hospitality, dismissing it as pathetic naivety. He painted a picture of a bygone era, of a chef stuck in the past, incapable of keeping up with modern tastes. The review was a masterpiece of journalistic cruelty, designed to generate maximum outrage and firmly establish Julian Thorne as the undisputed arbiter of taste in Westwick. He submitted it immediately to Gourmet and Glimmer, confident it would be published without a single alteration, perhaps even a bonus. The article, emblazoned with the headline, "The Hearthside Diner, a Taste of Oblivion," went live within hours. It spread like wildfire across social media, amplified by Julian's own carefully curated online presence. Food bloggers, eager to ride the wave of controversy, reposted it. Comment sections exploded with vitriol, many echoing Julian's harsh sentiments, others piling on with their own exaggerated tales of dissatisfaction at old-fashioned diners. The backlash was swift and brutal. Online reservations for the Hearthside plummeted to zero. Customers, once regulars, began to call and cancel their long-standing reservations, or simply stopped coming altogether. The diner, already struggling, was now hemorrhaging money at an alarming rate. Evie's phone began to ring incessantly, not with new orders, but with anonymous, hateful calls and text messages, some threatening, some simply cruel, echoing Julian's dismissive words. "You should just close down. Old lady." One text read, "You're a disgrace to cooking." Read another. Evie, numb with shock and despair, watched her life's work crumble before her eyes. The letter from the landlord now seemed a trivial concern compared to this public crucifixion. Her staff, loyal but frightened, looked at her with worried eyes, their unspoken fears about losing their jobs hanging heavy in the air. She tried to tell herself it didn't matter, that one man's opinion couldn't erase decades of love and dedication. But the sheer volume of the negative response, the public humiliation, was crushing. She couldn't escape it. Every glance from a passerby, every whispered comment on the street, felt like a judgment. Her quiet world, her sanctuary, had been invaded, desecrated by the venomous words of a man who saw nothing but superficial flaws. Evie Hayes, the keeper of the Hearthside's soul, found herself trapped in a public nightmare, her reputation, her dignity, and her family's legacy on the verge of being utterly annihilated. She could not, would not, go back to the quiet struggle of before. The point of no return had been reached. Her world had been irrevocably shattered, forcing her to confront not just a financial crisis, but a profound crisis of identity and worth. She was no longer just fighting to keep her diner open. She was fighting for her very soul. The days following Julian Thorne's scathing review of the Hearthside diner bled into one another in a blur of despair for Evie Hayes. The relentless, vitriolic criticism had accomplished its cruel purpose. The once familiar jingle of the door, signaling a new customer, had fallen silent. The diner, usually a warm haven of comforting aromas and quiet chatter, now echoed with a chilling, oppressive stillness. Rows of empty booths stared back at her like vacant eyes, a constant, painful reminder of the public humiliation and the rapid decline of her family's legacy. The scent of simmering broth, once a source of deep contentment, now seemed tainted by the acrid smell of impending failure. Revenue plummeted from a trickle to a desperate drip, barely enough to cover the daily costs of ingredients, let alone the mounting rent and utility bills. The threat of forced closure, once a distant fear, now loomed large and terrifyingly imminent, a gaping maw ready to swallow everything she held dear. Evie spent her days in a state of quiet desperation, meticulously cleaning surfaces that no one would touch, polishing silverware that wouldn't be used. Her movements slow and mechanical, fueled by a stubborn refusal to fully succumb to the crushing weight of defeat. Her small, loyal staff, a handful of individuals who had been with the Hearthside for years, bore the brunt of the downturn with stoic worry. Clara, the seasoned waitress whose smile had greeted generations of customers, moved with a visible slump in her shoulders, her usual cheerful demeanor replaced by a deep-seated anxiety about her own financial security. Young Leo, the part-time kitchen assistant, typically full of youthful exuberance, now meticulously folded napkins with a quiet, somber focus. His dreams of saving for college slowly fading with each passing empty hour. Evie saw their unspoken fears, their worried glances, and it deepened her own agony. She felt responsible for their livelihoods, for their unspoken trust in her, and the thought of having to let them go was a knife twisting in her gut. The anonymous phone calls and hateful messages continued intermittently, piercing the silence of the diner like tiny, poisonous darts. "Shame on you, old hag," one caller sneered. "Your food belongs in the trash," read another text, their cruelty amplified by the sheer helplessness she felt. She felt exposed, vulnerable, stripped bare in the public eye, her decades of honest, heartfelt work reduced to a single, devastatingly negative review. The profound sense of public shaming was a burning brand on her soul. isolating her in a personal hell of doubt and despair. Unbeknownst to Evie, across town, a young reporter named Mark Chen, fresh out of journalism school and eager to make his mark, was staring at Julian Thorne's scathing review with a deepening sense of unease. Mark, who wrote for the local section of the Westwick Daily, was a budding journalist with an old-school idealism, a genuine curiosity for the human story behind the headlines. He found Julian's review unnecessarily cruel, almost gleefully vindictive. It lacked the nuance, the balanced perspective that Mark believed was the hallmark of true journalism. He had grown up hearing his grandmother speak fondly of the Hearthside Diner, remembering it as a place of warm food and even warmer smiles. The stark contrast between the diner's local reputation and Thorne's brutal assessment piqued his journalistic curiosity. There had to be more to the story. He pitched the idea of a counterpiece, a human interest story about a struggling local business fighting for survival, to his skeptical editor. "It's about resilience," Mark argued, his voice earnest. "It's about the heart of our community." His editor, wary of directly challenging Julian Thorne's burgeoning influence, reluctantly gave him the green light, but with a warning: "Keep it light. Mark, no heavy-handed poor old diner stuff, just a fluffy local interest piece. Don't stir up trouble." Mark agreed, but secretly, he hoped to unearth something more substantial, a truth that Julian Thorne had deliberately overlooked. And so, one particularly dreary afternoon, Mark Chen found himself stepping through the silent doors of the Hearthside Diner. The bell above the door jingled, a startlingly loud sound in the oppressive quiet. Evie, startled, looked up from wiping down an already sparkling clean table, her eyes wide with apprehension. She braced herself for another cruel remark, another empty gesture of pity. But Mark's demeanor was different. He carried a small notepad and a genuine, albeit hesitant, smile. "Ms. Hayes," he asked, his voice respectful. "Mark Chen, the Westwick Daily. I'm doing a small piece on local businesses. Mind if I grab a bite?" Evie, weary but ever the gracious host, simply nodded, gesturing to a booth. Mark ordered a slice of her famed apple pie, remembering his grandmother's nostalgic tales of its legendary warmth and flaky crust. Evie moved to the kitchen, her movements slow, heavy with exhaustion and despair. She felt hollow, her usual passion for cooking dimmed by the pervasive gloom. But as she began to prepare the pie, her hands, almost instinctively, took over. She selected the apples with a practiced eye, their crisp sweetness a familiar comfort. She measured the spices, blended the flour and butter for the crust, her fingers kneading the dough with a muscle memory that transcended her current emotional state. It was an almost unconscious act of creation, a final, desperate prayer embedded in the food itself. She poured a lifetime of experience, of dedication, of quiet artistry into that single slice of pie, polishing it with a final, almost ritualistic sprinkle of cinnamon. When Evie placed the slice of apple pie before Mark, a faint steam still rising from its golden crust, he looked at it with an appreciative eye. He took a bite, slowly, savoring the warmth, the complex symphony of sweet and tart apples, the buttery, melt-in-your-mouth pastry. His eyes, initially just curious, widened in genuine surprise, then in profound recognition. This wasn't just a good pie. This was a masterpiece of flavor and texture, a testament to culinary skill that belied the diner's humble appearance and the recent scathing review. It was deeply comforting, exquisitely balanced, and profoundly delicious. He took another bite, then another, the subtle nuances of cinnamon, nutmeg, and perfectly cooked apples dancing on his palate. He looked at Evie, truly looked at her, and saw not a struggling old woman, but a quiet artist. He realized, with a jolt, that Julian Thorne's review was not just wrong. It was a profound, almost criminal, misjudgment. He saw through the faded decor and the quiet emptiness of the diner, directly to the heart of Evie's undeniable talent. "Ms. Hayes," Mark began, his voice hushed with awe. "This is incredible. This is not just a pie. This is art." He paused, his journalistic instincts kicking into high gear. Julian Thorne's review, it completely missed the mark. How is this possible? Evie, surprised by his genuine reaction, offered a small, hesitant smile. "It's just my grandmother's recipe." She demurred, her voice soft. "Something old-fashioned." Mark shook his head. No. This is more than just a recipe. This is technique. This is passion. This is mastery." He pressed gently, his curiosity now fully ignited. Have you always cooked like this? Have you ever had formal training?" In that moment of shared connection, faced with genuine admiration instead of cynical judgment, something shifted within Evie. The years of quiet humility, of downplaying her own accomplishments, began to peel away. The vulnerability brought on by her recent despair, coupled with Mark's earnest, appreciative gaze, compelled her to reveal a glimpse of her past, a truth she rarely spoke of. "Well," she began, her voice a soft murmur, almost a whisper, as if speaking secrets to the quiet diner itself. "When I was young, a very long time ago, I did study for a while. In Paris, at Le Cordon Bleu." Mark's eyes widened, his pen suddenly poised, ready to capture every word. "I won a few small competitions back then," she continued, a faint blush touching her cheeks. "And I had the opportunity to work in some of the finest kitchens. I even had a few young apprentices, brilliant young minds, eager to learn. I taught them what I knew, not just about recipes, but about the heart of cooking." She didn't name names, didn't boast of specific accolades. Her humility remained, but the subtle glimmer in her eyes, the proud lift of her chin, hinted at a past far grander than anyone in Westwick suspected. "But," she added, her gaze sweeping around the familiar worn diner, "my heart was always here, with my family, with the hearthside. I chose this quiet life. It felt right." She saw Mark's jaw drop, his pen hovering over his notepad, utterly stunned by the revelation. He knew instantly that this wasn't just a fluffy local interest piece anymore. This was a story of a hidden legend, a culinary master concealed in plain sight. This was the unveiling. Only Mark, the young, idealistic reporter, bore witness to Evie's unwitting confession. He recognized the profound significance of her words, the stark contrast between her humble demeanor and her illustrious past. His mind immediately connected the dots. Le Cordon Bleu, Paris, young apprentices. He knew the culinary world well enough to understand the weight of such a history. He also knew that this revelation directly contradicted Julian Thorne's dismissive review, turning it into a laughable display of ignorance. He was determined to dig deeper, to uncover the full extent of Evie's forgotten legacy. This was a scoop, a chance to not only vindicate the hearthside diner, but also to expose Julian Thorne's arrogance and superficiality. Across town, Julian Thorne, basking in the perceived glory of his latest scathing review, received an unexpected email. It was a forwarded draft of Mark Chen's initial human interest piece on the hearthside diner, sent to him by a mole in the Westwick Daily's editorial team, a junior editor eager to curry favor with the powerful critic. Julian skimmed the article, his smug smirk slowly twisting into a sneer of contempt. "A heartwarming piece on that dump," he muttered, scoffing at Mark's seemingly naive attempt to portray the diner in a positive light. He scoffed at Mark's rudimentary attempts to capture the soul of the diner, finding it sentimental and amateurish. But then, a few lines jumped out at him. "Ms. Hayes, a former student of Le Cordon Bleu, apprenticed several promising young chefs." A cold, unsettling sensation snaked through Julian. Le Cordon Bleu apprentices. This went beyond a simple puff piece. This was a direct challenge to his authority, a subtle but undeniable refutation of his judgment. It implied that he, Julian Thorne, had missed something profound, something important. The thought infuriated him. His ego, fragile beneath its layers of arrogance, felt directly threatened. He saw Mark's article not as an attempt to tell a different story, but as a direct, personal affront, an amateurish attempt to undermine his professional standing. Consumed by a furious need to reassert his dominance and crush any burgeoning sympathy for the Hearthside diner, Julian Thorne immediately set his malicious plan into motion. He saw this as a war, and he intended to win. He leveraged his extensive network, contacting his most loyal followers, influential food bloggers, and local radio personalities he had previously buttered up. He anonymously initiated an online poll on various popular social media platforms and local foodie forums. Westwick's worst eatery vote for the city's biggest culinary disappointment. He discreetly and illegally used bots and fake accounts to aggressively promote the poll, subtly directing votes towards the Hearthside diner, drowning out any positive sentiment with a flood of manufactured negativity. His goal was clear: to ensure the Hearthside won by a landslide. Not just to humiliate Evie, but to publicly discredit Mark Chen's burgeoning journalistic efforts and to send an unequivocal message to anyone who dared to challenge his authority. He even publicly mocked Mark on his own social media, dismissing him as an amateur trying to stir up pity for a lost cause. Julian Thorne, the quintessential evil adversary type A, whose ambition was fueled by pure malice and an insatiable desire for control, was not content with merely destroying the Hearthside. He wanted to orchestrate its very public, utterly humiliating demise. He wanted to make an example of Evie Hayes, to cement his reign as the supreme arbiter of Westwick's culinary scene. The game had just begun, and Julian Thorne was playing for keeps. The ominous hum of impending doom vibrated through the very foundations of the Hearthside diner. Julian Thorne's worst restaurant in Westwick online poll, initially a discreet maneuver, had exploded into a vicious public spectacle. Fueled by Julian's relentless self-promotion and his network of sycophantic food bloggers, the poll became a trending topic on local news outlets and social media, turning the Hearthside into a punching bag for online trolls and casual critics alike. Each passing hour brought a fresh wave of humiliation. The diner's empty tables mocked Evie, echoing the cruel laughter of the internet. The once comforting scent of her kitchen now seemed tainted by the acrid smell of impending failure. The warning from her landlord, once a singular threat, now felt like the least of her worries. Her entire life's work, her family's cherished legacy, was being systematically dismantled, brick by painful brick, in the most public and humiliating way imaginable. Evie felt an icy tendril of fear coil around her heart. The sheer weight of public condemnation was suffocating. Every time she stepped outside, she imagined eyes on her, whispering, judging. The few loyal customers who still trickled in offered hesitant smiles of pity, which felt almost worse than outright contempt. Her phone, once a lifeline, now sat silent, devoid of new orders, but constantly vibrating with notifications from news alerts and social media, each one a fresh stab to her already wounded pride. She saw the headlines, the mocking emojis, the endless stream of comments echoing Julian's venomous review. Outdated, disgrace, close down already. The words seared themselves into her mind, burrowing deep, threatening to extinguish the last flicker of hope. She battled a profound sense of isolation. Her small staff, though loyal, could offer little beyond shared worry. Clara, the usually stoic waitress, teared up one morning while cleaning tables, admitting she'd started looking for other work. Leo, the young kitchen assistant, typically full of youthful exuberance, now meticulously folded napkins with a quiet, somber focus, his dreams of saving for college slowly fading with each passing empty hour. Evie's heart ached for them, for the dreams that were being crushed alongside her own. The advice from well-meaning friends, and even some distant relatives, echoed in her ears. Just give up. Evie, it's not worth it. You've fought long enough. You deserve to rest. Each word, meant to comfort, felt like a concession to defeat, a tacit agreement with Julian's destructive narrative. She found herself wrestling with the most profound fear of her life, the fear of failure, not just for herself, but for the generations of Hayeses who had poured their lives into the hearthside. The thought of their legacy ending with her, ending in such public disgrace, was a torment worse than any physical pain. She saw her grandparents' faces, their hands gnarled from work, their eyes shining with pride in their humble diner. She saw her parents, tirelessly working behind the counter, teaching her the sacred art of feeding people, of building community through food. Could she truly let their efforts culminate in this public humiliation? The thought gnawed at her, fueling an internal war between the instinct to retreat from the pain and a stubborn, deep-seated refusal to surrender. She clutched her worn leather journal, its pages a physical link to a past where her talent had been celebrated, not ridiculed. The memories within its covers, of sun-drenched kitchens in Paris, of whispered praises from demanding chefs, felt impossibly distant, like dreams from another lifetime. She yearned for validation, not from the fickle public, but from the quiet knowledge that her culinary spirit was still true, still vibrant, still capable of creating beauty. But how could she prove it, when every avenue seemed closed, every voice against her, and the very ground beneath her feet felt like it was crumbling? The chilling announcement came days later, echoing across Westwick's media landscape like a grim death knell for the hearthside. Julian Thorne, basking in the controversy he had so meticulously engineered, grandly declared that the results of his Worst Restaurant in Westwick poll would be revealed at the upcoming annual Westwick City Culinary Awards. This was no ordinary local event. It was the city's most prestigious gastronomic gathering, a dazzling affair where Michelin-starred chefs, influential critics, and the city's elite foodies converged to celebrate culinary excellence. Thorne, with his characteristic flair for the dramatic, had secured a prominent speaking slot, undoubtedly planning to turn the award ceremony into his personal platform for public humiliation. He even hinted, with a condescending smirk on a local morning show, that the winner of his poll would be graciously invited to accept their award on stage. This was the ultimate arena, a symbolic stage designed to ensure Evie's final, crushing defeat would be witnessed by the entire city, broadcast live to thousands, cementing her diner's fate as a public laughingstock. The very thought of stepping onto that stage, into the blinding glare of spotlights and the unforgiving gaze of a judging audience, sent shivers of dread down Evie's spine. It was a calculated act of public execution, and Julian intended for her to be the star victim. Mark Chen, the young reporter who had witnessed Evie's quiet unveiling, felt a surge of urgent despair. His counterpiece, detailing Evie's prestigious culinary past and the genuine artistry of her food, had been repeatedly stalled by his editor, who feared antagonizing Julian Thorne and Gourmet and Glimmer. The editor, influenced by the rising tide of negative public opinion and corporate pressure, saw Mark's story as a risky gamble, potentially damaging the paper's relationship with a powerful critic. Mark argued passionately, vehemently, that this was about journalistic integrity, about giving a voice to the voiceless, about exposing a cruel injustice. But his pleas fell on deaf ears. The clock was ticking. The culinary awards were just days away. If his story wasn't published before then, Evie would face Julian's onslaught completely unprotected, her dignity irrevocably shredded. The pressure mounted on Mark as well. His own burgeoning career, his reputation as a journalist who sought truth, hung in the balance. He was desperate to help Evie, to expose Thorne for the fraud he was. But he was caught in the suffocating web of media politics and corporate timidity. The impending ceremony felt like a ticking time bomb, poised to obliterate everything Evie represented and extinguish his own budding journalistic integrity. In this crucible of despair, Evie found herself utterly, terrifyingly alone. There was no one to consult, no financial backer to magically materialize, no powerful ally to intervene. Her old loyal staff, though supportive, were as helpless as she was. The burden of the hearthside's survival, of its honor, rested solely on her weary shoulders. She knew that if she chose to attend the awards, to face Julian Thorne directly, she would be walking into a lion's den. Every eye would be on her, waiting to see her crumble, waiting to revel in her public humiliation. It would be a gauntlet she had to run, alone, with no shield from the piercing gazes, no buffer against the whispered judgments. The thought of Liam's cold indifference, or worse, his pity, in that grand hall was paralyzing. But beneath the paralyzing fear, a different emotion began to stir, a flicker of resolute determination, born from the very depth of her despair. She had caused this by not fighting harder, by letting her humility become a weakness. She had allowed her silence to be misconstrued as mediocrity. She had permitted her family's legacy to be dragged through the mud. And now, she had to face it. This was her moment of truth, a personal and public crucible. She had to prove, not to Julian, or to the judging public, but to herself, that her values were true, that her passion was unwavering, that the soul she poured into her cooking was indeed worth fighting for. The quiet genius, the formidable talent, the profound integrity that Julian Thorne had so arrogantly dismissed. These were the weapons she possessed. She had been too quiet, too humble for too long. Now, she would have to stand firm, to reclaim her dignity in the face of public scorn. Her reputation, her last vestiges of dignity, perhaps even her very sense of self, were on the line. The royal diamond, the precious gem of her culinary past, had been buried beneath layers of self-effacement and societal neglect. Now, it was time to unearth it, to let its brilliance shine. She was stepping into the lion's den, not for external validation, but for internal peace, for the quiet satisfaction of confronting her own demons and defending the essence of who she truly was. She knew the cost of failure, a lifetime of nagging regret, the bitter taste of missed opportunities, and the lingering shame of a truth she had been too blind to assert. But the image of a future where she could stand tall, unburdened by her past mistakes, propelled her forward. This was her gauntlet, her ultimate test, and she would face it, come what may. The Westwick City Auditorium, usually a bastion of civic pride and cultural events, thrummed with a different kind of energy on the night of the annual Westwick City Culinary Awards. Every polished surface gleamed under the soft glow of designer lighting, reflecting a kaleidoscope of bespoke suits and glittering gowns. The air buzzed with the murmur of sophisticated conversations, punctuated by polite laughter and the gentle clinking of champagne flutes. It was a symphony of success, a celebration of culinary excellence. And for Evie Hayes, it felt like walking into the heart of a dazzling, yet utterly unforgiving, inferno. She stood just inside the grand entrance, a solitary figure amidst the swirling grandeur, her simple, elegant black dress an understated statement, a stark contrast to the flamboyant displays of wealth that shimmered around her. The sheer opulence was overwhelming, the confident ease of the attendees, a stark reminder of the world she had so desperately craved, and tragically, so thoroughly misunderstood, in her youth. Her gaze swept across the expansive hall, seeking him out amidst the dazzling crowd. And then she saw him. On the brightly lit stage at the far end of the room, bathed in a spotlight, stood Julian Thorne. He wasn't just a critic tonight, he was a master showman, undeniably charismatic, effortlessly commanding the attention of every single person in the room. He wore a perfectly tailored midnight blue tuxedo, his coiffed hair catching the light as he moved with an exaggerated swagger. His eyes, usually hidden behind a veil of condescension, now gleamed with a self-satisfied triumph. He spoke with a booming, theatrical voice, his words resonating through the hall as he lauded the courageous evolution of Westwick's culinary scene, his voice dripping with ironic praise. He spoke of weeding out the stagnant and the uninspired, of elevating taste and sophistication. His arrogance was palpable, radiating from him like heat, drawing the attention of even the most jaded critics in the audience. Evie watched him, a lump forming in her throat, a cold knot of dread tightening in her stomach. He was everything she wasn't. Flashy, loud, superficial. The sheer magnitude of his influence, the depth of his malice, threatened to suffocate her. A wave of profound anxiety, so potent it almost buckled her knees, washed over her, an agonizing counterpoint to the polite applause that now rippled through the hall as Julian paused for effect. As Julian paused, basking in the reflected glow of the audience's attention, he began to move towards a large digital screen on the stage, preparing for his grand reveal. Evie knew this was her moment, her only chance. She took a deep, shaky breath, attempting to steel her nerves, and began to weave her way through the densely packed crowd, a single-minded determination eclipsing her overwhelming fear. Every step felt like an immense effort, each breath a conscious act. She saw familiar faces, former colleagues who had scoffed at her choice to run a diner, even some of her few remaining regulars, their expressions a mix of pity and disbelief. Their eyes widened in recognition, their polite smiles barely concealing their surprise, their curiosity, their judgment. She felt their silent evaluation, the unspoken questions hanging in the air. What is she doing here? After everything, is she really going to let him humiliate her? The pressure was immense, a tangible weight on her shoulders. But she pushed through, her gaze fixed solely on Julian Thorne, a lone beacon in the glittering, judging sea of faces. She had to face him. She owed it to her family, to her legacy, to herself. Just as she was mere yards from the stage, preparing to finally utter his name, to somehow confront him, a familiar, cloyingly sweet voice cut through the hum of the crowd. Julian Thorne, now standing directly in front of the giant screen, suddenly cleared his throat, his theatrical smile broadening. He had meticulously orchestrated this moment, ensuring that the cameras were precisely positioned to capture the dramatic unveiling of the poll results. He had known, with chilling certainty, that Evie, with her stubborn sense of dignity, would likely show up. This was perfect. He could simultaneously deliver his crushing blow, assert his undisputed authority, and publicly cement the Hearthside Diner's fate as Westwick's ultimate culinary pariah. His motivation was purely self-serving, to burnish his own reputation as a fearless, uncompromising critic. He wanted to see Evie squirm, to watch her navigate the glittering, judgment-filled room, and to revel in her public discomfort, using her as the ultimate prop in his own self-aggrandizing performance. "Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed colleagues," Julian boomed into the microphone, his voice dripping with condescension. "Tonight we celebrate excellence, but it is also our duty to acknowledge those who perhaps haven't quite reached the pinnacle of culinary artistry." He paused dramatically, letting the suspense build. "As many of you know, I initiated a poll, a public referendum, if you will, on what the discerning palates of Westwick consider to be the least inspiring establishment in our fair city." He gestured grandly towards the screen behind him, which now flashed with the words, "Westwick's Worst Eatery." "And the results," he announced, a triumphant smirk playing on his lips, "are in, and the overwhelming winner, with an unprecedented number of votes, is the Hearthside Diner." The words hit Evie like a physical blow, even though she had anticipated them. A ripple of nervous laughter, mixed with gasps of surprise and subtle murmurs of pity, swept through the audience. Julian's eyes, alight with malicious glee, scanned the crowd, seeking out Evie. He spotted her, standing frozen just a few rows back, her face pale but resolute. "And I believe," he continued, his voice dripping with mock sincerity, "we have the esteemed owner of the Hearthside Diner, Ms. Evelyn Hayes, with us tonight. Ms. Hayes, would you do us the honor of accepting this recognition?" He extended an arm towards her, a grotesque parody of an invitation. fully intending to drag her onto the stage for her public crucifixion. Evie, though her legs felt like lead, began to move forward, a grim determination set on her face. She would not hide. She would face him, face the judgment, and endure the humiliation with whatever shred of dignity she had left. This was her self-imposed penance, her final act of defiance. She was utterly alone, walking a gauntlet of judging eyes, each step an agony. Then, just as she reached the edge of the stage, preparing to ascend, a low, authoritative voice cut through the nervous hum of the crowd, a voice that carried an undeniable resonance, a quiet power that silenced the room instantly. "Stop!" All eyes, including Julian Thorne's, snapped towards the source of the voice. Standing regally in the very first row, having arrived discreetly moments before, was Chef Antoine Dubois, the world-renowned 3-Michelin-star French chef, a legend in his own right. Stood tall, his impeccably tailored suit a stark contrast to Julian's flashy attire. His gaze, usually serene, was now fixed on Julian Thorne with an intensity that brooked no argument. A ripple of astonished murmurs swept through the audience. Chef Dubois. Here Julian Thorne's triumphant smirk vanished, replaced by a look of stunned disbelief, then confusion, then dawning horror. He had not anticipated this. No one had. Antoine Dubois, with a measured grace that belied his simmering anger, began to walk towards the stage. Each step was deliberate, impactful. The audience parted before him like the Red Sea. He reached the stage, his gaze never leaving Julian Thorne's face, a look of profound disappointment and cold fury in his eyes. He didn't shout. He didn't grandstand. His voice, when he finally spoke, was calm, resonant, and utterly chilling in its quiet authority. "Julian Thorne," he said, his voice echoing through the silent auditorium. "You have made a grave mistake. You have slandered a legend, insulted an artist, and, worst of all, you have proven yourself utterly devoid of true taste and understanding." He reached the microphone, gently but firmly taking it from Julian's trembling hand. Julian stood frozen, his face ashen, his mouth slightly agape, utterly bewildered by Antoine's unexpected intervention. Antoine then turned, his gaze sweeping over the astonished faces in the audience, then resting for a poignant moment on Evie, who stood by the stage, tears beginning to stream down her face, not of sorrow, but of an overwhelming, profound relief and gratitude. He bowed deeply to her, a gesture of profound respect that brought another gasp from the audience. "Madame Hayes," he said, his voice imbued with genuine reverence, "you are my first and greatest teacher. You taught me that cooking is not merely a technique, it is a profound act of love. Your beef stew, your apple pie, these are not culinary disgraces, as this man claims. They are the very soul of authentic gastronomy. They are proof that true culinary art resides not in pretentious presentations or exorbitant prices, but in the heart, in the hands, and in the enduring spirit of the chef." He turned back to the audience, his voice now imbued with a powerful, emotional resonance. "Ladies and gentlemen," he declared, his voice cutting through the stunned silence, "for over a decade, I searched the world for a chef who could teach me the true soul of cooking. My mentors at Le Cordon Bleu, for all their technical brilliance, knew one truth, that to truly master the art, one must find the spark of emotional connection. They sent me, a young, arrogant student, to a humble, unassuming diner on the outskirts of Paris, run by a prodigious young American chef named Evelyn Hayes." A collective gasp rippled through the audience, followed by a wave of hushed whispers. Julian Thorne looked as if he was about to faint. "She," Antoine continued, gesturing towards Evie with an outstretched hand, "taught me everything. She taught me to listen to ingredients, to understand the story behind each dish, to infuse every creation with a piece of my heart. Without her, there would be no Chef Antoine Dubois, no Michelin stars, no global restaurants." He reached into his inner jacket pocket and withdrew a small, exquisitely framed photograph, its edges slightly worn. It was a picture of a much younger Evie, radiant and smiling, standing proudly in a bustling professional kitchen, surrounded by eager young apprentices, one of whom was a strikingly young Antoine Dubois. He held it up for all to see, the image projected onto the giant screen behind him, silencing the last vestiges of doubt in the room. Then, he pulled out a faded, official-looking document, its paper yellowed with age. "And this," he announced, his voice ringing with triumph, "is a letter of recommendation from the director of Le Cordon Bleu, dated over 30 years ago, describing Madame Hayes as a culinary prodigy, a visionary artist whose profound understanding of flavor and passion for nurturing talent will undoubtedly shape the future of gastronomy. She was and is a legend, a quiet legend perhaps, but a legend nonetheless." Mark Chen, watching from the audience, sprang into action, furiously typing on his phone, sending the breaking news to his editor, who, now realizing the magnitude of the story, frantically gave him the green light to publish immediately. The reaction was instantaneous, thunderous, and overwhelming. The Westwick City Auditorium erupted in a cacophony of sound. A collective gasp of astonishment was followed by a rising tide of applause, then a full-blown standing ovation. From the hoity-toity critics to the everyday foodies, faces transformed from skepticism to utter disbelief, then to profound awe, and finally to an explosion of joyous admiration. People surged forward, not just to congratulate Antoine, but to try and catch a glimpse of Evie, to offer their heartfelt apologies and expressions of newfound respect. Chefs from Michelin-starred restaurants, who had once dismissed the hearthside, now rushed forward, bowing to Evie, their faces contorted with regret and genuine admiration. Julian Thorne, on the other hand, stood utterly frozen on the stage, his face ghastly pale, his jaw slack, his eyes wide and vacant. He looked like a puppet whose strings had been abruptly cut, his carefully constructed facade shattering into 1,000 irreparable pieces. The triumphant smirk was gone, replaced by a grotesque mask of utter humiliation and profound terror. He stumbled backward, his legs giving way, almost tripping over himself, as he desperately tried to escape the blinding lights and the crushing weight of public scorn. He was not just dismissed, he was rendered utterly irrelevant, publicly shamed and utterly disregarded, a non-entity in the brilliant orbit of Evie Hayes. His grand scheme had backfired spectacularly, burying him beneath the very rubble he had intended for Evie. He simply stood there, a grotesque statue of shattered pride, as the roar of the crowd intensified, a magnificent symphony of vindication for Evie Hayes. Evie stood on the stage, tears streaming down her face, not of shame, but of profound, shattering realization and overwhelming relief. She was not crying for what she had lost, but for what she had finally found a deeper understanding of herself, of true value, and of the profound, immutable connection between authenticity and lasting worth. Liam's words, his actions, had not publicly shamed her. Instead, he had offered her an unspoken grace, a quiet dignity in her moment of profound personal revelation. He had shown her, through his actions, what true integrity looked like, and in doing so, had set her free to find her own. The thunderous applause was a balm to her soul, a symphony of acceptance and recognition. She had faced her demons, defended her legacy, and emerged from the crucible stronger, truer to herself than ever before. The Hearthside Diner, once a symbol of quiet struggle, now stood vindicated, a beacon of authentic taste and enduring spirit. Its true light finally revealed to the world. The reverberations of Chef Antoine Dubois' dramatic intervention at the annual Westwick City Culinary Awards spread through the city like a seismic wave, reshaping the landscape of its gastronomic world for Julian Thorne, the self-proclaimed titan of Westwick's culinary scene. The fall was not merely professional, it was a public annihilation, swift and utterly merciless. His meticulously constructed persona, a shimmering edifice of sophisticated taste and intellectual superiority, crumbled into ignominious dust under the unforgiving glare of the media spotlight. His smug, theatrical performance on stage, his condescending tone, and his malicious attempt to humiliate Evie Hayes were meticulously documented by every news camera, every social media live stream. The damning image of his ashen face, frozen in a mask of shock and terror as Antoine Dubois systematically dismantled his credibility, went viral, spawning countless memes and becoming a symbol of hubris spectacularly undone. The public outcry was immediate and overwhelming. Gourmet and Glimmer, the very magazine that had lionized him, swiftly issued a public apology to Evie Hayes and the Hearthside Diner, disavowing Julian's review and announcing his immediate termination. Other publications, eager to distance themselves from the now tarnished critic, pulled his columns, citing ethical breaches and lack of journalistic integrity. Restaurants that had once fawned over him now publicly denounced him, several even launching campaigns to donate a portion of their profits to local community kitchens, a subtle but unmistakable rebuke to his elitist disdain for humble establishments. His meticulously curated network of influential food bloggers and sycophantic followers abandoned him en masse, wary of associating with a pariah. His attempts to salvage his reputation with apologetic statements on social media were met with a torrent of mockery and condemnation. Julian Thorne, the quintessential evil adversary type A, whose ambition was fueled by pure greed and a callous disregard for human dignity, found himself utterly isolated, his name synonymous with scandal and journalistic malpractice. He became a cautionary tale whispered in journalism schools and fine dining kitchens, a stark reminder that arrogance, when unchecked, inevitably devours itself. Stripped of his career, his influence, and perhaps most painfully, his carefully constructed public image, he retreated into bitter obscurity, a ghost haunting the very city he had once sought to dominate. Meanwhile, for Evie's long-standing social circle, the friends and family who had subtly, sometimes overtly, pressured her to abandon the hearthside for a more sensible or profitable path, the aftermath of the gala brought a quiet, yet profound, reckoning. There were no dramatic public apologies from them, no grand gestures of remorse, but the shift in their demeanor towards Evie was palpable, a gentle easing of the invisible chains of expectation that had bound her for so long. The incessant, probing questions about the diner's finances, once loaded with thinly veiled concern, ceased entirely. Conversations, previously dominated by discussions of market trends and profitable ventures, now pivoted towards deeper, more authentic topics, often initiated by them. Evie's sister, who had always urged her to sell the old place, now called frequently, her voice softer, less insistent, genuinely asking about Evie's well-being and her renewed passion for cooking, rather than her bank balance. Old friends, who had subtly distanced themselves, now reached out, inviting her for quiet lunches, not to scrutinize her choices, but to genuinely reconnect and acknowledge her resilience. Their expressions, once clouded with pity or a faint air of superiority, now held a newfound respect, even a quiet admiration. They acknowledged, implicitly, their own part in perpetuating the societal pressures she had faced, their silent understanding that they too had been swayed by superficial values. This quiet, almost imperceptible shift was the repentance of the misguided adversaries type B. They had been swayed by the pervasive narrative of material success and social status, but confronted with the undeniable truth of Evie's integrity and the undeniable brilliance of her artistry, they had undergone their own, more subdued, transformation. Their silent acknowledgement of their error, their renewed respect for Evie's unwavering authenticity, was a profound gift, a quiet balm for her wounded spirit. Elena felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in years, a profound sense of acceptance that transcended words. The chains were gone, not broken in a dramatic explosion, but simply loosened, then gently removed, allowing her to finally breathe freely, unburdened by the weight of external expectations. The most profound shift, however, occurred within Evie herself. The culinary awards had been a crucible, burning away the dross of her self-doubt and the lingering fear of judgment, leaving behind the pure, unadulterated gold of self-awareness and renewed purpose. She did not, as many might have expected, attempt to leverage her newfound fame for personal gain or to pursue a romantic relationship with Antoine Dubois, despite the undeniable, unspoken bond that had formed between them. The thought of a grand reconciliation, of basking in the glow of his celebrity, flickered briefly, a tantalizing temptation. But she swiftly extinguished it. She understood, with absolute clarity, that her journey of redemption was not about external validation or about winning back a perceived lost love. It was about winning herself back. To pursue Antoine, to chase the fleeting glory of his world, would be to repeat her past mistakes, to seek validation from an outside source for a transformation that had to be entirely internal. Antoine had, in his profound wisdom, given her a far greater gift than a second chance at a relationship. He had given her the ultimate impetus to find her own true path, to embrace the quiet, profound power of her own authenticity. Elena made a decision that surprised even herself, a bold step that severed the last ties to her previous, misguided ambitions. She resigned from Synergy Marketing Solutions. The environment, once perceived as the pinnacle of her professional aspirations, now felt toxic, stifling, a constant, painful reminder of the hollow values she had once chased. She needed a fresh start, a clean break from a past defined by superficiality and relentless self-promotion. She took a leap of faith, accepting a challenging position at a small, dynamic tech startup specializing in educational software development. The company, still in its nascent stages, offered a fraction of her previous salary, and certainly none of the glamour, but it promised something far more valuable: an environment where creativity, genuine contribution, and independent thought were celebrated, not stifled by corporate politics or superficial metrics. It was a place where ideas, not expensive suits, held true currency, where innovation was driven by a desire to make a real difference, not just to turn a profit. Elena embraced the challenge with a renewed vigor, her mind buzzing with fresh ideas, her days filled with a deep sense of meaning that had long been absent from her high-powered marketing career. She worked longer hours than ever, but the exhaustion was different, a fulfilling weariness that came from genuine effort, from solving real problems, not from the relentless pressure of maintaining a facade or navigating a cutthroat corporate ladder. One quiet evening, several weeks into her new role, Elena sat on her small balcony. The familiar city hummed now a comforting, almost melodic backdrop. She held a steaming mug of chamomile tea, her gaze drifting across the twinkling skyline. A gentle knock at her apartment door stirred her from her reverie. It was Sarah, a newly hired marketing assistant at her new startup, a bright, eager young woman with a passion for tech and a refreshingly honest perspective. Elena had quickly taken Sarah under her wing, seeing in her a reflection of her own younger self, but with an added vital layer of idealism that Elena now wished she had possessed earlier in her career. Sarah clutched a thick, well-worn paperback, a collection of essays on ethical technology and social impact. "Hey, Elena," Sarah said, her eyes shining with youthful enthusiasm. "Just wanted to pick your brain about something. I was reading this amazing piece about Liam O'Connell, not just his tech, but his philosophy behind it. It's so real. And it got me thinking about how so many people just chase after the shiny things. You know, the money, the status, and they miss out on what truly matters." Sarah paused, her gaze meeting Elena's, a hint of earnest vulnerability in her eyes. "It's funny. Sometimes the people who seem to have the least on the surface actually have the most to offer. Like, they're building something amazing, quietly, while everyone else is just looking at their bank accounts." Elena felt a profound resonance with Sarah's words, a quiet ache of recognition that was no longer painful, but deeply affirming. She smiled, a soft, genuine smile that reached her eyes, reflecting a hard-won wisdom. "You're absolutely right, Sarah," Elena said, her voice gentle, tinged with a quiet understanding she had earned through painful experience. "It's easy to get caught up in the noise, in what everyone else tells you success should look like. It's easy to lose sight of what's truly valuable when the world is constantly telling you to chase what's flashy and grand." She took a sip of her tea, its warmth spreading through her, mirroring the quiet contentment in her soul. But true value, it's often hidden in plain sight. It's in the quiet dedication, the unwavering integrity, the consistent pursuit of something truly meaningful, whether anyone else sees it or not. It's in the genuine contribution, the passion that drives you, even when there's no applause. She paused, her gaze drifting back to the city lights, remembering the bitter lessons of her past. "I learned that the hard way. It took a lot of pain, a lot of missteps, a lot of very public humiliation to finally see what was truly valuable, and to see what I had, almost, thrown away." She didn't elaborate, didn't need to. Sarah, with her sharp intuition and empathetic nature, seemed to grasp the unspoken nuances of Elena's words, sensing the deep personal journey behind them. She was a new ally, a kindred spirit who, though younger and less experienced, offered a fresh perspective that mirrored Elena's newfound understanding, a testament to her ongoing growth. Elena continued, her gaze fixed on the distant city lights, a profound sense of peace settling over her. "And sometimes," she added, her voice a soft murmur, almost a whisper, "the most profound lessons come from the people you least expect, from the moments of greatest loss. They force you to look inward, to strip away all the external expectations, all the superficial desires, and to figure out who you truly are and what truly matters to you." She turned to Sarah, her eyes reflecting a quiet, profound contentment, a serene light that had replaced the anxious flicker of her past. "Don't ever let anyone else define your worth, Sarah, and don't ever let the pursuit of more blind you to the quiet brilliance that's already around you, or more importantly, within you." Sarah nodded, her eyes wide with understanding, absorbing Elena's words like a sponge, a genuine respect shining in her gaze. "I won't, Elena," she promised, her voice earnest. "Thanks. That really helps. A lot." She smiled, a genuine, appreciative smile, before excusing herself to continue her reading, leaving Elena in the quiet solitude of her balcony. Elena watched her go, a sense of profound peace settling over her. The once empty apartment no longer felt hollow. It was filled with the quiet resonance of her own growth, her hard-won wisdom, and the subtle, ongoing process of self-discovery. She had found her own form of wealth, not in financial abundance or social status, but in the richness of self-acceptance, in the profound satisfaction of purpose, and in the quiet courage to live authentically, unbound by external expectations. The city hummed outside, no longer a symbol of relentless striving, but a vibrant backdrop to her newfound serenity. She had found her new calm, a profound peace that radiated from within, a testament to a spirit that had been broken, but ultimately, beautifully, healed, ready to face whatever the future held with quiet confidence. 5 years later, the Hearthside Diner stood as a vibrant testament to resilience, authenticity, and the enduring power of a truly compassionate heart. The quiet corner of Westwick it occupied, once overshadowed by the city's relentless pursuit of the new, had transformed into a beloved landmark, a beacon of gastronomic integrity. The scent of Evie's slow-simmered stews and freshly baked pies no longer carried the faint undertone of desperation. Instead, it filled the air with a comforting warmth, drawing in eager patrons from across the city and beyond. The red vinyl booths, once painfully empty, now hummed with the joyful cacophony of bustling lunch rushes and intimate dinner conversations. The worn wooden door, its bell ringing almost constantly, welcomed a diverse clientele, from loyal regulars who remembered the diner's lean times to curious newcomers drawn by its burgeoning reputation. At the very heart of this remarkable resurgence, a quiet force of nature, stood Evelyn, Evie Hayes. Her silver hair, now a luminous white, still pulled back in her signature neat bun, framed a face etched with the gentle lines of a life well lived, her eyes sparkling with a profound contentment that radiated from deep within. She was no longer just the owner-chef of a struggling diner. She was a revered culinary figure, a living legend. Her hands, still calloused from decades of dedicated work, moved with the same practiced grace, transforming humble ingredients into dishes that nourished not just the body, but the soul. The Hearthside Diner, while still small and intimately cozy, had blossomed into an iconic establishment, frequently featured in national food magazines and local travel guides. Hailed as a pilgrimage site for those seeking authentic, heartfelt cuisine, Evie, however, remained remarkably grounded, untouched by the celebrity that now orbited her quiet life. She still greeted every customer with a genuine smile, still took immense pleasure in the simple act of cooking, and still found solace in the familiar rhythm of her kitchen. Her victory wasn't in grand expansion or flashy ventures, but in the profound satisfaction of preserving her family's legacy with unwavering integrity. She had achieved not just professional success, but a deep, unshakable inner peace, finding true happiness in her work and an enduring sense of purpose. Evie's vision, however, now extended far beyond the cozy confines of the Hearthside. Driven by a deep-seated desire to ensure that other truly talented but overlooked culinary artists would not suffer the indignity and despair she had endured, she established the Hearthside Culinary Apprenticeship Program. This groundbreaking initiative, launched with the generous and discreet financial backing of Chef Antoine Dubois, was offered entirely free of charge, making it accessible to aspiring chefs from all walks of life, particularly those from disadvantaged backgrounds who possessed immense talent but lacked the conventional resources or connections to pursue their dreams. The program was unique in its philosophy. Evie didn't just teach recipes, she taught the very soul of cooking. Apprentices learned not just techniques, but the importance of genuine connection to ingredients, the profound art of infusing dishes with emotion, and the quiet dignity of selfless service. They learned the history behind each dish, the stories of the families who had perfected them, and the joy of creating food that spoke directly to the heart. Evie personally mentored each cohort of students, her wisdom a guiding light, her quiet encouragement a powerful catalyst for their growth. She spent countless hours in the kitchen with them, her movements a living demonstration of culinary mastery, her words echoing with the lessons she had learned through both triumph and adversity. The program quickly gained national recognition, attracting passionate young talents eager to learn from the legendary Mère Cuisinière. Many of her apprentices, imbued with Evie's philosophy, went on to open their own successful, heartwarming establishments, often small, community-focused diners that mirrored the Hearthside's ethos. Others found their way into some of the most prestigious Michelin-starred kitchens around the world, always speaking of Evie Hayes as the person who truly taught them the soul of gastronomy, acknowledging her profound influence on their careers and their understanding of food. Evie herself, though rarely leaving Westwick, became a revered figure in culinary education. Her story and her unique approach to mentorship chronicled in documentaries and academic papers on gastronomy. Her unwavering belief in the intrinsic value of honest, heartfelt cooking had not only saved her own diner, but had sparked a quiet revolution, ensuring that true culinary artistry, regardless of its humble origins, would always find its path to bloom. The annual Westwick City Culinary Awards, now a shining testament to the city's vibrant and inclusive food scene, had been gloriously transformed. On a brilliant, star-dusted evening, 5 years after the terrifying precipice of crisis, Evelyn Hayes stood on the grand stage of the renovated Westwick City Auditorium, accepting a Lifetime Achievement Award for her extraordinary contributions to culinary arts and education. The auditorium, packed to capacity, shimmered with a kaleidoscope of elegant gowns and sharp tuxedos, its grand arches echoing with the joyful cacophony of a thriving, secure community that deeply valued its culinary heritage. The air buzzed with the confident murmurs of prosperous businesses, the relaxed laughter of families, and the harmonious melodies of a live orchestra, a rich symphony of urban life restored and enriched. Thousands upon thousands of citizens, their faces radiant with gratitude and admiration, watched her, their applause a thunderous testament to the quiet revolution she had helped orchestrate. Evie was no longer the awkward, dismissed diner owner, shrinking from public attention. She was a woman of profound presence, her quiet power radiating an aura of wisdom, unshakable confidence, and deep humility. Her easy smile and relaxed posture spoke volumes of her inner peace, a calm forged in the crucible of adversity. In her hand, instead of her old, battered canvas journal, she now held a sleek, elegantly designed crystal award, its engraved surface reflecting the auditorium's glittering lights. The award, however, was merely a symbolic representation of the far greater impact she had made on countless lives and on the very fabric of Westwick's culinary identity. She scanned the faces in the audience, meeting Chef Antoine Dubois' gaze, which held a look of profound respect and genuine warmth. He offered her a subtle, appreciative nod, a silent acknowledgement of their shared journey. She saw Mark Chen, now a respected investigative journalist, smiling brightly from the front row, a silent testament to their enduring partnership and friendship. And she saw countless new faces, young and eager, many of them her own former apprentices, their eyes shining with inspiration, their presence a powerful testament to the ripple effect of her enduring generosity. The image was iconic. The woman who was once ostracized and ridiculed for her seemingly outdated ways now stood as a living embodiment of the city's resurgence, a powerful, inspiring symbol of how perseverance, unconventional thinking, and unwavering integrity can not only avert disaster, but cultivate a richer, more vibrant, and profoundly more compassionate future. Her story, etched into the very fabric of Westwick, woven into the renewed prosperity of its businesses and the joyful spirit of its people, served as a permanent, powerful reminder that even in the deepest darkness, the light of courage, truth, and genuine connection to the subtle patterns of the world will always, inevitably, find its path to illuminate the way forward. The hum of the city was not just the sound of urban life, it was the sound of hope, of resilience, and of a future built on understanding, respect, and the profound wisdom that often lies hidden in plain sight, waiting only for a discerning eye and a loving heart to reveal its true, undeniable brilliance. If this story stirred your heart, if it reminds you that courage can alter destinies and that light always finds a path even in the deepest darkness, please leave a comment. Share this story with those who need inspiration. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell to never miss our upcoming stories.